In this video, we'll take a look at some of the most powerful Dragon-type Pokemon cards, a type that is notoriously strong in the video games and just as strong in the trading card game. At number 10, we have Flygon from Black and White Boundaries Cross. Its Sand Slammer ability puts 1 damage counter each of your opponent's Pokemon between turns, and its Flying Beatdown attack deals 80 damage for 1 Grass, 1 Fighting, and 2 Colorless energy. When using this attack, you may choose to discard 1 Grass, 1 Fight energy to leave your opponent's active Pokemon paralyzed, with Paralyzed being a condition where the Pokemon can't attack or retreat for 1 turn. While this attack is very costly and was rarely used in decks that made use of it, it's a nice hint towards what Flygon decks were eventually trying to accomplish. They made use of Excelgor from Dark Explorers and its Deck and Cover attack, which deals 50 damage for 2 colorless energy and leaves the defending Pokemon paralyzed and poisoned, but also forces you to shuffle Excelgor and all cards attached to it into your deck. What may seem like a disadvantage at first was actually a core part of this deck strategy. By shuffling Excelgor and all cards attached to it into your deck, you got to decide your new active Pokemon, which made it possible to send up Flygon to put some Sand Slammer damage on your opponent's Pokemon in play. The final piece of the puzzle was Dusknoir, also from Boundaries Cross. Its Sinister Hand ability lets you move any damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another one, as often as you'd like during your turn. This ability was used to move damage counters off your opponent's Pokemon to make sure that you can keep paralyzing it with Excelgor's Deck and Cover, without taking a knockout and allowing your opponent to attack. As this combo required a lot of moving pieces, the deck had to play a bunch of consistency cards and ways to keep Flygon players in the game before your opponent got too far ahead. One of the most relevant consistency pieces, and the reason that made it hard for your average player to play the deck at its full potential, was the Tropical Beach Stadium card. As long as this stadium is in play, either player may choose to draw up cards until they have 7 cards in hand, but then their turn ends. This card was a participation promo for players in 2011 and 2012 World Championships, and therefore didn't make it easily accessible for most players. Many decks were already using Tropical Beach for their early setup, but would later have to purely rely on draw supporters and item cards as they couldn't afford to end their turn to draw cards. Flygon, on the other side, could easily afford passing up on some attacks in favor of getting a better setup, especially since Sand Slammer would deal some damage in the early game, especially in combination with Max Potion item cards, which heals one of your Pokemon completely at the cost of discarding all energies attached to it. Flygon could even take a couple of hits before going down. Once the setup of Excelgor, Dusknoir, and Flygon was established, the deck was incredibly powerful, and some decks could not deal with the combination of cards at all, making Flygon one of the best Dragon-type Pokemon of all time, even without having to attack itself. And at number 9, we have Duraludon VMAX from Sword and Shield Evolving Skies. Its Skyscraper ability prevents any damage done to it by Pokemon with special energies attached to them. And for when fighting into meta energies, its G-Max Pulverization attack deals 220 damage and ignores any effects on the defending Pokemon. Duraludon didn't immediately have an impact on the stage, but even early on, players realized the potential that a 330 HP Pokemon without weaknesses that could protect itself from attackers with special energies and deals 220 damage itself had. Back then, players tried to make use of the Cheryl Supporter card that heals all of your evolved Pokemon in play and discards all energies attached to them. The initial problem was that it was very hard to power up Duraludon quickly due to its 3 energy requirements, and therefore also made it hard to use Cheryl efficiently. One benefit the Metal typing in Duraludon's attack had was that it could make use of Bronzong from Battle Styles and its Metal Transfer ability. This ability allows you to move a Metal energy from one of your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon as often as you'd like during your turn. Normally, this would mean that after using Cheryl, you still had to find a new fighting energy as you can only move Metal energies with Metal Transfer. But the deck had an easy solution for this problem. By using this special energy card Aurora Energy, which forces you to discard a card from your hand to attach it and provides any type of energy to Pokemon it's attached to. This means that it counts as a fight energy when attacking with Duraludon VMAX, but could also be moved with Metal Transfer. While this combination of cards wasn't incredibly hard to pull off, the amount of attackers that could knock out Duraludon VMAX without having to use any kind of special energies, or take out Bronzong with cards like Boss's Orders, a support card that lets you switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon, made it impossible for the deck to keep up with the top decks at the time. For the next set release, the deck underwent a complete identity change. With the Fusion Strike set released and the 2021 set rotation, the metagame was flipped upside down completely, and Duraludon VMAX found itself in a much better spot than before. With many special attacker energies among the top decks, its Skyscraper ability became much more impactful, and instead of playing a deck full of supporter Pokemon to help with using Cheryl, the deck was now purely using Duraludon VMAX while trying to heal it as much as possible with various item and supporter cards. Duraludon VMAX finally established itself as a top deck, but this was only the beginning. When Brilliant Stars released, Duraludon VMAX finally found the partner it had been looking for ever since its release. Arceus VStar and its Trinity Nova attack, which deals 200 damage for 3 colorless energy and attaches up to 3 basic energies from your deck to your Pokemon V in play. On top of that, its Starbirth VStar power lets you search your deck for any 2 cards once per game. Even the regular Arceus V is able to provide excellent help for Duraludon thanks to Trinity Charge, an attack that, just like Trinity Nova, lets you search your deck for up to 3 basic energies and attach them to your Pokemon V in play. The difference in those two attacks is that Trinity Charge needs 1 less energy and doesn't deal any damage. With Double Turbo Energy, a special energy provides 2 colorless energy and reduces any damage dealt by 20, released in the same set as Arceus VStar, attacking with Trinity Nova on the second turn became a reliable strategy, and has helped many costly attackers to make an entry into the meta. Of those attackers, Duraludon VMAX is definitely the one with the most longevity, considering that it was played right as Arceus VStar was released and will stay relevant at least until 2023 set rotation. This, in combination with it being able to hold its own in the Fusion Strike format, makes it one of the most powerful dragon types. And at number 8, we have Rayquaza EX from Black and White Dragon Exalted. For 1 colorless energy, its Celestial Roar attack discards the top 3 cards of your deck and, if any of those cards are energy cards, attaches them to this Pokemon. For 1 fire and 1 lightning energy, its Dragon Burst attack lets you choose between discarding all fire or lightning energies attached to this Pokemon, and deals 60 damage for each of these energies discarded. The usual choice was lightning most of the time, as this Pokemon was usually paired with electric from Noble Victories. Its Dino Motor ability lets you attach a lightning energy from discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. Each of your electrics in play could use their ability once per turn to attach up to 4 lightning energies to Rayquaza EX, which could then deal up to 240 damage, which was usually enough to knock out any Pokemon in the game at the time. The fire energy requirement of Dragon Burst would have to be fulfilled by attaching a fire basic from your hand, which is why the deck usually opted to play Energy Surge, an item card that searches your deck for a basic energy card and puts it into your hand to make attacking with Rayquaza EX easier. The deck also played various cards to switch out your active Pokemon because the limitation of Electric always forced you to have either a second Rayquaza EX on your bench, or to be able to get the one you used to attack back to your bench and be active again. Once this deck got going, the only thing that could stop it was hand disruption, as many decks struggle with the high damage output that Rayquaza EX was able to get out. And at number 7, we have Ultra Nexrozma GX from Sun and Moon Forbidden Lights. Its Photon Geyser attack requires 1 Psychic and 1 Metal Energy, and discards all Psychic energies attached to this Pokemon. You then deal 20 damage plus 80 more for each energy you discard in this way. Its GX attack, Sky Scorch and Light GX, can only be used once per game, and only when the total number of remaining prize cards between both players is 6 or less. This attack then puts 6 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. To provide this card with enough energy to deal a lot of damage with its Photon Geyser each turn, it was paired with Malamar from the same set. Malamar's Psychic Recharge attack lets you attach a Psychic energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. If you paid attention to our previous entry, you might have realized this deck functions just like the Rayquaza EX and Electric deck from the Black and White era of the trading card game. The reason why Ultra Nexrozma GX is higher up on this list than Rayquaza EX is the fact that it's provided with much better tools to work with. One of Rayquaza EX's biggest flaws was its consistency, as you did have a lot of reliable ways to find your Pokemon because Level Ball, an item card that is your deck for Pokemon with 90 or less HP, could also grab Tynamo and Electric, but wasn't able to help finding Rayquaza EX itself. One card that was able to find all these pieces was Ultra Ball, an item card that discards 2 cards from your hand and lets you search your deck for a Pokemon of your choice. Aside from these 2 item cards, the deck mostly relied on using supporter cards to find its missing pieces. Ultra Nexrozma GX and Malamar had much better consistency cards than that. Just like its Black and White counterpart, the deck was able to use Ultra Ball, but in addition to that, it got access to Nest Ball. An item card lets you search your deck for any basic Pokemon and put onto your bench to help finding Inkay and Ultra Nexrozma GX. But in addition, it also got access to the powerful Mysterious Treasure item card. This card requires a discard from your hand to be used and lets you search your deck for a Dragon or Psychic-type Pokemon. This is exactly the typing this deck needed and was largely responsible for being able to set up a lot in games. Another benefit that the Nexrozma and Malamar deck had was that the format at the time offered many non-GX Psychic-type attackers that could be played in the deck. This made it much easier to pilot matchups where Ultra Nexrozma GX wasn't very helpful, such as decks that are primarily using 1 prize Pokemon to attack with. This added consistency and versatility compared to Rayquaza EX easily makes it the stronger card, even when considering those cards came out in a different era of the game. And at number 6, we've got Rayquaza GX from Sun and Moon Celestial Storm. When played from your hand, its Stormy Winds ability lets you discard the top 3 cards from your deck and attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to Rayquaza GX. For 1 Grass, 1 Lightning, and 1 Colorless energy, Dragon Break deals 30 damage for each basic Lightning and Grass energy attached to all of your Pokemon in play. Its GX attack, Tempest GX, allows you to, once per game, discard your hand for 1 Grass energy to draw 10 new cards. The combination of Stormy Winds and Dragon Break allows you to quickly ramp up damage to overwhelm your opponent by being able to knock out each of their Pokemon in 1 hit. When Rayquaza GX first came out, shortly before the 2018 World Championships, it was played in a so-called Turbo build, where your entire goal was to burn through your deck with Stormy Winds and cards like Max Elixir. An item card lets you look at the top 6 cards of your deck and attach a basic energy you find there to one of your bench Pokemon to use Dragon Break as soon as the first turn of the game. This version of the deck was very successful at the World Championship by taking 1 of the top 4 spots and 2 more in the top 8. Going forward in the 2018-2019 season, a different version of the deck that was more focused on a slow setup started emerging, mainly due to some of the important cards for the turbo version like Max Elixir no longer being part of the game. So the deck had to evolve. The main energy acceleration now was Vigavolt from Sun and Moon, strong charge ability that lets you search your deck for grass and lightning energy to attach to your Pokemon in any way you'd like. Its Electro Cannon deals 150 damage for 1 lightning and 3 colorless energy, and requires you to discard 3 energies from it. Stormy Winds became a less relevant ability in this version of the deck, as there were a lot more cards you didn't want to actually discard it with, like pieces for your Vigavolt setup for example. It still remained a viable option should the deck ever need some extra energy to deal with bigger threats. After this version of the deck fell out of the meta, Rayquaza GX never really recovered as the main attacker for a deck. While it saw some niche play as a tool for energy acceleration in different decks, it's safe to say that its peak time was the early 2019 season, where it was one of the best decks. And at number 5, we have Giratina EX from X and Y Ancient Origins. Its Renegade Pulse ability prevents all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Mega Evolution Pokemon. For 1 Grass, 1 Psychic, and 2 colorless energy, its Chaos Wheel attack deals 100 damage and prevents your opponent from playing any tool cards, stadiums, or special energies during the next turn. Even when Giratina EX was released in 2015, dealing 100 damage for 4 energies was below average. But because of some previously released cards, it immediately grabbed the attention of players. Not only was double colorless energy able to provide any Pokemon with 2 colorless energies for a single attachment, but Roaring Skies, the set just before Ancient Origins, brought the best dragon support card to the game. Double Dragon Energy provides a dragon-type Pokemon it's attached to any type of basic energies and provides 2 of them at once. Thanks to those 2 powerful special energies, Giratina EX could easily be powered up by either attaching 2 Double Dragon Energies or a Double Dragon Energy and a Double Colorless Energy. The first instinct that players had when the full set list of Ancient Origins was revealed was to pair it with Vileplume from the same set. Its Irritating Pollen ability prevents both players from playing any item cards from their hand. So the initial idea was to combine Giratina EX with Vileplume to attack with Chaos Wheel, while Vileplume was in play to prevent your opponent from playing tool cards, special energies, stadium cards, and item cards, basically limited them to their supporter cards only. This seemed especially powerful when considering that the same set brought one of the best stadium cards of all time in Forest of Giant Plants. As long as the stadium card is in play, grass-type Pokemon can evolve immediately when they're put into play, instead of having to wait a turn. This works all the way up to Stage 2, allowing players to get Vileplume to play in a single turn. While the combination of Vileplume and Forest of Giant Plants eventually became one of the best combinations in the game, this early draft of Giratina EX decks was never able to live up to its expectations because it had some issues with finding all the pieces to set up and also had a rough time dealing with decks that didn't care too much about Chaos Wheel and Irritating Pollen. This was by no means the end of Giratina EX, though as players figured out that Seismitoad EX was a better partner for it. For only 2 colorless energies, its Quaking Punch attack deals 30 damage and prevents your opponent from playing any item cards during the next turn. Since Giratina was already playing double colorless energies anyway, this became a great partner that didn't require you to play any additional energies or other resources, as its other attack, Grenade Hammer, was never used in the deck. Not having to play Vileplume and Force of Giant Plants also allowed the deck to play other disruption cards instead, and Giratina EX/Seismitoad quickly became one of the best decks at the time. Especially because, depending on the matchup, it could use either Seismitoad EX or Giratina EX depending on which of them was more disruptive in the given matchup. For some time, this was the way to play Giratina EX, but when X and Y Breakpoint came out, it also became the centerpiece of another strategy. For 2 colorless energy, Darkrai EX's Dark Pulse attack deals 20 damage and additional 20 for each darkness energy attached to all of your Pokemon. Since it doesn't specify basic energies, any Double Dragon Energy attached to Giratina EX provided with 2 extra energies, or 40 extra damage. While this deck didn't run double colorless energy anymore to make space for cards that were needed to facilitate Darkrai EX, it was still easily possible to attack with Giratina EX in matchups where it was needed due to cards like Max Elixir. Alternatively, you could still go down the route of attaching 2 Double Dragon Energy to Giratina EX. Being a core aspect and 2 powerful archetypes established Giratina EX as one of the best Dragon-type Pokemon of all time. And at number 4, we have Black Kyurem EX from Black and White Plasma Storm. For 3 colorless energy, its slash attack deals 60 damage, and for 2 water, 1 lightning, and 1 colorless energy, Black Ballista deals 200 damage but also forces you to discard 3 energy cards attached to this Pokemon. Just like the previous entries' list, with heavy attack requirements, Black Kyurem EX needed some help with attaching energies to itself. This help had fortunately already been around at this point thanks to Blastoise from Boundaries Crossed. Its Deluge ability lets you attach water energies from your hand to your Pokemon and play as often as you like during your turn. Hydro Pump deals 6 damage for 4 colorless energies, but adds 10 more damage for each water energy attached to this Pokemon. Now, Blastoise had already been a mainstay in the format at this point, thanks to Keldeo EX from the same set. Its Rush In ability lets you switch Keldeo EX from your bench with your active Pokemon, but more importantly, its Secret Sword attack deals 50 damage plus 20 more for each water energy attached to it for 3 colorless energies. At the point of Black Kyurem EX's release, the Keldeo EX/Blastoise deck had already established itself as one of the best decks in the game, and helped with covering some of the less positive matchups. One of the main problems Keldeo EX had was the fact that it needed a lot of energies attached to it to get to the relevant 170 or 180 HP Pokemon at the time, Without damage modifiers of any kind, Keldeo EX needed 6 or 7 energies respectively to get into those damage thresholds. This could oftentimes cause a deck to run out of steam towards the late game or run out of energies entirely to deal with big HP threats immediately. Especially one of the most popular cards, Mewtwo EX, caused a lot of trouble for Keldeo EX. Its X-Ball attack deals 2 damage for each energies attached to both active Pokemon. Considering that it already needed 2 on itself to be able to attack, it could quickly get to around 170 damage if it needed to knock out Keldeo in one hit if too many energies were attached to it. Black Kyurem EX took care of both of these weaknesses by only needing 4 energies to deal 200 damage, and also discarding them for the attack cost to mitigate some of Mewtwo EX's damage. Thanks to Black Kyurem EX, Keldeo EX/Blastoise is able to establish itself as the best deck at the time. And even if Black Kyurem didn't remain popular for an incredibly long time or sparked multiple archetypes, it still established itself as one of the best Dragon-type attackers in the history of the game. And at number 3, we have Garchomp and Giratina GX from Sun and Moon Unified Minds. For 1 colorless energy, its linear attack deals 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Calamitous Slash deals 160 damage for 1 fighting, 1 psychic, and 1 colorless energy, but deals an extra 80 damage if the defending Pokemon already has any damage counters on it. Its GX attack, GG and GX, requires 2 psychic energies and 1 fighting to discard one of your opponent's Pokemon and all cards attached to it from their field. If you manage to attach 3 more fighting energies to the card, you get to pick 2 Pokemon to discard. When Garchomp and Giratina GX first got released, players' immediate thought process was to include it in the aforementioned Malamar deck to replace Ultra Nexrozma GX. What made this card work so well in the deck is the fact that it already used a bunch of cards that were setting up damage counters, so linear attack could be used to pick up some easy knockouts, or Calamitous Slash's additional damage would be activated. The most important card in that regard was Giratina from the Lost Thunder. Its Distortion Door lets you put Giratina from your discard pile into your bench, and if you do, pick 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon and put a damage counter on each of them. Its attack deals 130 damage for 2 psychic energies and 1 fighting, but forces you to place 4 damage counters on one of your Pokemon. Distortion Door by itself is already one of the best abilities of all time by letting you put multiple damage counters onto your opponent's field when Giratina is in the discard pile. The fact that the deck could also use it as an attacker and therefore force your opponent to knock it out, which then would allow you to use it again, makes it even better. Garchomp and Giratina GX only played a minor role in this deck, and was primarily used as a finisher or to deal with big threats. But soon after, it would see its identity shifted towards being the main focus of a different deck. This new deck first appeared on the big stage when it made the top 8 at the 2019 Latin American International Championships. Instead of using Malamar's Psychic Recharge to power up various attackers to overwhelm your opponent, this deck focused on controlling the game thanks to various comeback mechanics. First and foremost, the deck made use of Mismagius from Unbroken Bonds, a card that had been out for a while but didn't see any play up until this point. Its Mysterious Message ability lets you knock out this card to draw cards until you get 7 in hand. Letting your opponent go ahead in the prize trade enabled 2 tool cards that provided Garchomp and Giratina GX with additional energies, without having to attach them. When behind the prizes, Counter Gain provides the Pokemon it's attached to with 1 colorless energy, and Karate Belt does the same but for 1 fighting energy. Both of them work on Garchomp and Giratina GX thanks to its energy requirements, but only Counter Gain enables you to use linear attack for free. Another core part of the deck strategy was Reset Stamp, an item that lets you shuffle your opponent's hand to the deck and lets them draw new cards equal to the number of remaining prize cards. Since Garchomp and Giratina GX gives up 3 prizes when knocked out, this deck uses 2 Mysterious Message abilities and can still force your opponent to go through 2 Garchomp and Giratina GXs, while being able to reap all the benefits from the aforementioned comeback cards that make you want your opponent to take prizes. This deck immediately caught on shortly after, but the Malamar version still stuck around. The arguably best deck to use Garchomp and Giratina GX in the standard format was a modified version of the comeback variant we just talked about. The goal was to still use multiple Mismagius to force your opponent into awkward prize trades, but in addition to that, the deck was using the Roxy supporter card. Roxy lets you discard up to 2 Pokemon that aren't GX or EX Pokemon to draw 3 cards for each card discarded this way. While you could discard your unwanted Mismagius or Misdrevius, the main target for Roxy was Weezing from Cosmic Eclipse. Its Blown Away Bomb ability activates once it's discarded by the effect of Roxy, and places 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon. This provided the deck with extra consistency thanks to Roxy's draw power, but at the same time also helped with setting up for future knockouts. A card that dominated that much in the standard format was almost certain to see some success in the expanded format as well, and Garchomp and Giratina GX delivered there as well. Thanks to Double Dragon Energy and many more powerful trainer cards, a different variant featuring Roxy quickly became the best deck in the format as well. Being able to dominate one format is already an immense accomplishment, but being able to do it again in 2 formats at the same time is something we've rarely seen before, establishing Garchomp and Giratina GX as one of the best attackers ever, and definitely one of the best Dragon-type Pokemon of all time. And at number 2, we have Giratina VStar from Sword and Shield Lost Origin. Its Lost Impact attack deals 280 damage for 1 Grass, 1 Psychic, and 1 Colorless Energy, and you're required to put 2 energies attached to your Pokemon into the Lost Zone. Its V-Star power, Star Requiem, can only be used if you have 10 cards in the Lost Zone, and requires 1 Grass and 1 Psychic Energy. This attack immediately knocks out your opponent's active Pokemon. Having an attack that simply deals 280 damage already makes the Pokemon interesting to look at, and it's enough to knock out most other Pokemon that are already being used as attackers in other decks. Normally, these kinds of attacks are printed with ridiculous energy requirements or insane drawbacks. But in Giratina VStar's case, only requiring 3 energies to use the attack is more than reasonable. It actually had 2 very good ways to accelerate energies available to it. One side it could be used alongside was Arceus VStar, which we've already talked about for the Duraludon VMAX. But using Arceus VStar's Starbirth V-Power would prevent you from using Giratina's VStar's powerful Star Requiem attack, as you can only use 1 V-Star power per game. The much more fitting archetype for Giratina VStar were the Lost Zone cards that were released alongside it in Lost Origin. The supporter card, Colress's Experiment, lets you look at the top 5 cards in your deck, choose 3 of them to put into your hand, and place the remaining cards in the Lost Zone. Comfy's Flower Selecting ability will let you look at the top 2 cards in your deck, pick one of them, and put the other one into the Lost Zone. Both of these cards are incredibly powerful consistency cards, especially thanks to a lot of items that allow you to use multiple Flower Selecting abilities per turn. Getting cards into the Lost Zone is not only helpful to fulfill Star Requiem's requirement of 10 cards in there to be used, but also enables one of the most powerful item cards for energy acceleration. Mirage Gate can only be used when you have at least 7 cards in the Lost Zone, and lets you choose 2 different kinds of basic energy cards from your deck and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like, making it perfect to attach the 2 different energies to Giratina VStar. While this version of the deck was much more powerful and successful than the one that was used with Arceus VStar, both of them were able to find success up until the next set release that would completely shift the metagame around and remove Giratina VStar from it, because it's no longer able to keep up with the other good attackers. This wasn't the last we've seen of this card, as the Scarlet and Violet set rotation would put it back at the top of the meta and establish how powerful of a card it is, being able to recover from completely being pushed out of the game for a while. And finally, at number 1, we have Arceus and Dialga and Palkia GX from Sun and Moon Cosmic Eclipse. For 1 metal, 1 water, and 1 colorless energy, its ultimate ray attack deals 150 damage and lets you search your deck for up to 3 basic energy cards and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. For 1 metal energy, its GX attack, Attainted Creation GX, deals no damage, but for the rest of the game, the damage done to your opponent's active Pokemon by your attacks is increased by 30. If 1 extra water energy is attached to this card when this attack is used, in addition to getting the 30 extra damage for the rest of the game, you also get to take an extra prize whenever you knock out a Pokemon with damage from an attack. When this card first came out, a lot of players thought that its dual type attack cost for its GX attack would make it a solid card, but nothing incredibly powerful. Especially because the choice of metal and water Pokemon in the format to pair it with wasn't incredible. Arceus and Dialga and Palkia GX was able to establish itself as a solid top deck that still allowed some counterplay due to it giving up 3 prize cards when being knocked out, and the aforementioned lack of super powerful attackers. This point of view would change very quickly with the next set release, Sword and Shield. This set introduced Zacian V to the game. Its Intrepid Sword ability lets you look at the top 3 cards of your deck and attach any metal energies you find there to this Pokemon. The remaining cards are put back into your hand and the turn ends immediately after you use this ability. Its Brave Blade attack deals 230 damage for 3 metal energies and prevents this Pokemon from attacking on the next turn. Zacian V was the final piece that Arceus and Dialga and Palkia GX needed to break the game. Being able to use a 260 damage attack, 230 base damage plus 30 from Altered Creation, meant that with some of the other damage modifiers in the format, Zacian V could knock out even Tag Team GX Pokemons with 270 or 280 HP in one hit, and take an extra prize card when doing so. Afterward, any knockout with the added prize card from Altered Creation would win the Arceus and Dialga and Palkia GX player of the game in just 3 attacks, one of them being Altered Creation. Otherwise, the deck would also knock out the various 2 prize Pokemon in the format twice to take all 6 prizes in 2 attacks. This became especially problematic with so many support Pokemon having less than 180 HP, and giving up 2 prize cards, meaning Arceus and Dialga and Palkia GX to take them out with the Ultimate Ray to take 2 prize cards and power up a Zacian V to deal with any other Pokemon that could potentially attack. The availability of various item supporter cards that let you switch your opponent's active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon allowed for Arceus and Dialga and Palkia GX to always target a Pokemon of its choice. In the upcoming months, this interaction became so problematic that many players called for a ban of this card. For many players, the time when Arceus and Dialga and Palkia GX and Zacian V were legal at the same time became the worst time the game has ever seen. Not only due to their ability to win games in 2 damaging attacks, but also because of cards that other decks had to play to even keep up with it, such as Crushing Hammer, an item card that flips a coin and lets you discard energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon if the result is heads. Arceus and Dialga and Palkia GX is one of the most notoriously hated cards amongst players, largely due to its insane power level, which makes it the best Dragon-type Pokemon to ever be printed. Alright, and we hope you've enjoyed this video. If you know of any Dragon-type Pokemon we may have missed, or have any ideas for future videos similar to this one, please let us know down in the comments.